Hello everybody and welcome back to Elderberry Sprout. Today I'll show you how I modified my bullet journal for the next 6 months. So I started off with this Artist Lofts bullet journal. It cost $7.99 from Michael's, and this is the same one I've been using for about 3 years now. They actually had a new version that had a denser weight paper, but less pages. But I opted for the cheapo one because I like the amount of pages it has. So these journals are a great, cheap way to find a bullet journal that works well for me. I really like the size. Here I'm getting ready to glue the fabric on the outside, and I do a little sigil of a heart on the front. That's a really easy way to add intention to whatever working it is you're doing. The reason I wanted to cover this book in the first place was because it has a plasticky feel to it, and I wanted to make sure that it felt natural when I touched it so that I could revel in that connection to nature. And here I've got a little bit of glue seepage, but that ends up drying, so it's no big deal. Here I need to remove the elastic, so I just pull it out of the bottom. I'll end up cutting holes that I can lace the elastic through, and then at that point I can reinsert it into the hole that I removed it from in the beginning. And here I'm adding another protection sigil there. I've seen a lot of like Archer and Olive journals that have beautiful linen covers, and this is a hemp linen fabric. This fabric was originally a leg off of a pair of hemp linen pants, so this is a great way to use it up. Once everything's glued evenly and cured up, I'm trimming the corners of the fabric to prepare for folding it over. I just like to leave about 3/4 of an inch of fabric on each side to fold over. We'll also end up trimming the corners off so that it allows for a tighter curve to meet the curve of the cover. And here I'm clipping those corners. I like to start with the inner pieces of the clipping and then do the outer pieces over it. So I like to start with each of the corners first. I also like to clip next to the spine. It makes it easier when you end up putting the fabric in towards the spine. And this is just a lot of futzy work. I use Elmer's glue at this point. I have other glues, but this is just the one that I'm using for today. And you do have to hold it down a little bit before it really grabs. But I'm already liking how this is turning out. I've done some journals that aren't quite as clean as this one, so I'm feeling pretty good about this one. Okay, now it's time to reinsert the elastic. I'm just using a knife to cut all the way through the back of the journal, coming back in the other side, because we're going to be putting paper on the inside to hide all of our messy work here. So just glue it down, and we'll hide that later. And I just repeated the process to the back cover. And after a little bit of drying, here's where we're at. I like to put the cardboard in to help absorb any of the moisture off of the glue so that it doesn't warp the pages underneath. Now let's address the spine. So because I trimmed this little corner tuck, I can just glue it and use a pencil to poke it down in. And then I end up just putting the pencil in there to kind of keep it curving while it's curing. This is one of those details that not everybody does, but I really appreciate how finished it looks at the end once you have the full cover completely covered, including that spine. Oh, it looks so clean. Oh, I love it. It's those little details that I really enjoy. And there's proof that the elastic still works. Next up, we're going to be finding paper to cover the front and back inside pages. This is just a normal scrapbook paper. It doesn't have to be anything super heavy, but you want to make sure it's at least a normal paper weight. You want the thickness of the paper to be able to hide the edge of the fabric. Thankfully, this fabric wasn't super thick, so this isn't a big job to ask, but if you did use a thicker fabric to cover your journal, you might want to consider using a thicker paper on the inside. I didn't know which one I wanted to be the front cover, so I just kind of spent some time deliberating. And to get this to be the correct measurement, I just marked it and then cut it with my paper cutter. Just a little dash and slicing. Because this journal is about 6 inches wide, one sheet of scrapbook paper is about perfect for each of the covers. So these scrapbook papers I got secondhand, so I only had one sheet of each of them. It'd be nice to have a matching set, but I kind of like playing in that difference, you know? Just working with what you have already and seeing how to make it work. To adhere this to the cover, I'm just using a glue stick, and that works fine. The nice thing about having these offcuts of paper is that you'll be able to use them in your journaling to kind of keep a cohesive look later on through the year. One of these journals will last me about 6 months, so it's nice to have these offcuts to use later on. Just make sure you get your glue all the way to the edge of the page so that you can securely adhere it. And then once again, make sure that you add those pieces of cardboard in to make sure that you're absorbing all the moisture. You don't want warpy front pages. And here we go, all cured up, looking good. Just gotta trim those. Not even an inch, it's like a teensy bit. Gotta trim those edges off there. And there we have it, those pages are finished. Ah, so clean. Now it's time for us to start working on the pen loop. I have this little bag of leather scraps that I like to scrounge through when I do projects like this. I used to make a pen loop that I would clip onto my bullet journal, but I found when I threw my bullet journal in my purse, it would always like flop off or disconnect somehow, even if it was a super sturdy clip. So I've just resorted to finding scraps of leather and stapling it on, and that's worked so well. I did this to my last journal, which I've used for 6 months now, and not once has it come off. It's fantastic. It's definitely my new favorite system. Now it's really a matter of finding which leather I want to use. I think I'm opting for the same leather as I did in my last journal. You want it to be thick so that it will hold your pen, and you also want it to be rough on the inside so that it holds that pen, but it's not super, super tight. And the way that I like to do it is that I staple the inside first, and then on the outside, I'll push down the teeth of the staple, and then I'll staple the outside. And there we go, a lovely pen loop. We've already increased the functionality so much of this book. Now it's time for some decoration. I always like to add charms to my bullet journals just to kind of spice up the energy. Also, each 6 months I like to choose words of the year, so sometimes it's nice to have a little charm to remind you of that word of the year too. So I just laced this charm onto the string, and I did 1 square knot, which is essentially 2 overhand knots, left over right, right over left. And make sure you leave a little bit of a tail on it. This will come in handy when we secure it later. But now I need to find my other charm. Each one of these things has meaning to me. This little gold charm was from a bracelet that a student gave me one time. And these star earrings were my grandma's. Here's where the tails of the string come in. Because it's a polyester or a synthetic fabric string, or I guess ribbon, you're able to use fire to melt it down. So here, just use a match carefully, of course, and just put the match above the edges that you want to kind of glue down, and just slowly push down as it's getting a little bit melty. Of course, you're going to have iron fingers to do this, and exercise caution. But this system works so well that I've found it's easier for the charm to fall off because of the jump ring than it is for it to come off because of the ribbon, so I definitely suggest this system. And now for some more decoration. I wanted to emboss the front of this journal because I have this little star stamp that I carved, and I really like the design of it. I got this kit of embossing materials, and I wanted to experiment with them. We do have a little error later on, but I get a kick out of it, So I'm using this clear embossing pad with my normal stamp to stamp on the front of this fabric. I had to do it a couple of times to get it to really adhere first, but then I heated up the first layer and there it is. Because of the texture of the fabric, I had to do multiple layers of embossing to get a really glossy and secure finish on my stars. Oh, and these side stars, I'm putting on this copper embossing powder. This stuff is very fine, and it took a lot of detail work to clean up the edges. Spoiler alert, this copper embossing powder wasn't copper embossing powder. It was just like a shimmer. So I essentially just made the front of my journal a little bit dirty. That's kind of what happens sometimes when you buy secondhand materials and they're improperly labeled. So it's nice to know I have some beautiful copper shimmer though. Maybe I'll use that in painting later. But anyway, I'm just going to do layers of gold on top of these copper stars now. And you can see that copper coming up on the stamp itself because there is so much of it. And even after that first layer, I'm feeling so much better. Layer 2, here we go. Oh, and I'm doing some touch-up. I have an embossing pen, so I was doing some touch-up on that main center star. I do kind of like how rudimentary and like old school this is looking, so. And there we have it. There's the finished journal. We've got a functioning pen loop with staples, a really simple solution. The elastic works. We sliced it through the back of the fabric. We got new charms and everything. I like that there's silver and gold in this. We got new lining fabric. We got new lining paper on the inside and on the back. Oh, I'm so excited to use this journal for the next 6 months. Thank you so much for watching, you guys. I hope this gave you some inspiration to modify your journals in ways that make your life better. Have a magical day. Bye.